Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going over a series of video presentations I've created based on the PowerPoint slides for your Murox, HTML5, and CSS3, 4th edition, which is one of the two textbooks that's used for the Rankin Technical College AWD, Application Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies class. Alright, so far, it's been kind of a mixed bag. I did all of Section 1. I'm skipping Section 2 for now. Skipping Chapter 16 for now because I'm trying to get together some Flexbox examples, some grid layout examples, and some CSS transition examples. So that brings me to here. Chapter 17, 18, 19, and 20. And I'm going to start with Chapter 17. And so in many ways we've come full cycle because when I started these presentations, this is the first one that I went over. Alright, then I'll go over to 18, how to deploy a website on a web server, and there are different ways of doing it. This chapter brings up one of them, and we'll talk about this at again in more depth and breadth of coverage at a later time. How JavaScript and jQuery are used to enhance web pages. This is kind of a prelude into the next book. And then finally we end up with when and how to use third-party development tools. So let's start right away with Chapter 17, shall we? Again, as you can see, it's entitled How to Design a Website. And as mentioned in the first objective, it's a bunch of guidelines, methods, and procedures. That said, this is the way the author recommends that you do things. As always, not the only way to do things. Not going to say it is or is not the best. I always enjoy that in my own little way where somebody will read something or find an article and they'll say to me, is this right? Is this the best way of doing it? Almost always those are questions that can't be answered. Alright, because who knows if it's the best way or not. And it always seems like when somebody comes up with a good way of doing something, very soon after somebody else comes up with another way of doing the same thing. So they start by showing this website and they mention that it's easy to use. Again, not saying it is, not saying it isn't. But it has a lot of nice things in it, such as, well, it's got a logo right here. And typically with this logo that you see right here, if you click on it from any page, you get back to the home page. It's got a nice looking, fairly nice looking, I'd say, menu structure up on top here. Home, About Us, My Account, Customer Service. So there's at least 4 pages. We're at the home page right now. There's a link to your shopping cart. Alright. Free shipping orders, a little advertisement, I guess. Different foods that are shown right here. Alright. There's a search, and notice they tell you what kind of search it is. It's a food search. It says welcome guests, so you're probably not logged on. Or if you are, I mean, you don't have an actual account or you're not logged into that account. And then we've got some other stuff here, but you can see that pretty much what's nice about this is you can kind of see divisions in here and where stuff is split. Again, we've talked about this before. Typically, now this isn't always the case, but I always kind of look at it that with most website users, it's kind of like when you go into Google. All right, you want to be able to type something in, you want to be able to find it, get in, and get out. All right, and along those lines, as it says here in the second bullet, you want to get the information to do your task as quickly and as easily as possible. Now remember that looking at a web page is not like reading a newspaper. People will not read it in the depth and breadth of coverage. They like to scan to find out what they want. All right. They don't like to scroll, as it says. If they get frustrated, they'll leave. And perhaps that third bullet is the most important. All right? Because many people who use the web are, for whatever reason, impatient. They'll often click links and buttons with the hope of finding what they're looking for, whether that's it or not. They may click the back button when they don't find it. So here are some guidelines. And again, I've mentioned this before. I don't know if I can find this or not in here, but let's take a quick look. So here's a picture of a newspaper, a lot of pictures of a newspaper. And you can kind of see it right here, but this is referred to, so here's a whole newspaper, but if we saw one that's kind of folded in half, but where you can see all of it, this right here, this part is above the fold. The other part that you don't see is below the fold. All right, so I was hoping to see one that kind of looks like it's sort of in half, but not really. All right, we can just grab this one at the top. So when you look at this, if that was a newspaper or this one, above the fold would be everything over about that line. Below the fold would be down there. Why is that important? As mentioned right here, you want the critical information above the fold. All right, what you think most users are going to want, you want to put it up near the top so it's easy for them to get to. You want to group related things together. You want to adhere to most of these current conventions to web usability. Here are some of them. Again, here is the, call it what you want. This is the navigation bar between here and here. Actually, this is the header area. And the header area, as you oftentimes find, is you've got an image on here where you can click anything in here to get back from the home page regardless of where you are. All right, a little message here telling you that you can log in or you can create an account. A search bar up near the top. A link to your shopping cart near the top. Your navigation bar near the top. All right, stuff grouped together. Plus, you've got another area where you can search along the side. Now, again, to me, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this site. Nothing. Except for the fact, in my humble opinion, it's a little busy. Now, not everybody is going to agree with that. It's a nice-looking site, though. All right. So, as mentioned, the header consists there of a logo, tagline, utilities. The tagline has what's unique about the site. The navigation bar allows you to split the site into different sections. There is a search bar that's shown in the header with a button on it. All right, things to think about when you're writing this. Don't use underlines just because something's important. Most people, when they see an underline, they think it's a hyperlink and they're going to click it. And if they go and they put their mouse over it and they click it and nothing happens, they can easily get frustrated. If you've got an image that's got a short text phrase near it, make them both clickable. All right. If you click the cart symbol, go to the shopping cart. If you click the logo from any page, go to the header. Some of this has already been mentioned. So here is the San Joaquin Town Hall page, and it's a whole page. So what does it have here? Well, logo, header area, very nice setup, navigation bar, different color on the page that you're on, kind of nice. Now it doesn't have a shopping cart because probably there's nothing to buy from this site. All right, but again, it has been sectioned off. Now we've got a 2-column layout where we've got our main stuff up here, and then we've got our aside over here, and we've got a right justified footer down near the bottom. Looks nice on mobile. Okay. Now remember, when you're doing mobile, there's 2 ways of doing this. You can use responsive web design, which means typically you're going to start with building a big size site first, then you're going to add responsive design later, or you can build a separate website for mobile devices. Now with responsive web design, you've got to think about, do you want to go mobile first? That's usually the best idea. I haven't done that too much in websites that I've helped create or I've created myself. I usually go desktop first just because I'm used to doing it that way. But the advantage of going mobile first is that's the hardest. So typically if you want to expand the size, it's much easier than it is to start big and then reduce the size. All right, a home page that tries to sell the site. Again, make up your own mind whether or not this is a good site or not a good site. 9 guidelines for developing an effective homepage. Number 1, emphasize what your site offers that's valuable, how it differs from other sites. It's always a good thing. If I was going to try to come up with a competing site to this site, I'd want to look at my competition, see what works for them. If I identify some stuff that I think doesn't work for them, make sure I don't have that in my site. Number 2, emphasize high priority tasks so users have a clear idea of what they can do. Number 3, don't welcome users to the site with a big welcome. It's a waste of space. Remember, regardless of the medium that you're using, you've got a certain amount of real estate that you can use. And on mobile devices, especially phones, that's a very small area. Number 4, group items in the navigation areas so similar items are next to each other. Number 5, only use navigation icons if they're readily recognizable. Number 6, design the homepage so it's different from the other site pages. Number 7, do not include an active link to the homepage on the homepage. That's silly. Number 8, code the title element followed by a short description. Limit the title to 8 or fewer words and 64 or fewer characters. Remember that title element is when people bookmark it, that's typically how it's going to be bookmarked. Finally, if the site provides shopping, include a link to the shopping cart on the home page. All right. Here are breadcrumbs if you haven't seen those before. Tells you where you are, so you're under the site, dogs, traveling with dogs, etc. How to let users know where they are? Well, you can highlight the active link. You can make the heading for the page the same as the link that led to the page, or as mentioned, you can provide breadcrumbs. Now here's wasted space when you look at this. Okay? I mean, a big picture like that, that's taking up a heck of a lot of real estate. So you want to keep your header small, prioritize components, give the most important components primary locations. One thing about this, as you probably are noticing, is many of these rules are being mentioned again and again and again because they become unofficial kind of standards, de facto standards over time. Talk about chunking information. So notice we got a section here, a section here, a section here, one here, one here, and one here. All right? A page that ignores the basics of graphic design. All right? I have not mentioned this in class before. I find this, for lack of better words, a little amusing. You may not. But there's actually a gentleman who's created a website called Web Pages That Suck. And I can go out to webpagethatsuck.com, and he has actually created a culmination of pages. Notice there's 2014, etc. He's put these out as books. People buy them. For a lot of people, that they kind of present the how not to when it comes to doing things. For graphic designs, alignment, as it says, means related items on the page should line up with one another. Proximity says that related items should be positioned close to one another. Repetition means that as you go from page to page, have a common look and theme. Contrast is what draws your eye to the page. If everything is the same, nothing stands out. Again, that's for graphical. For typographical or textual guidelines, limit line length of paragraphs to 65 characters. You want some margin in there. Use a sans serif font. Remember, a serif is for printing. A sans serif is for viewing on a device. Show the relationship between a heading and the text that follows by keeping them close. Use dark text on a light background when possible. Don't use an image for the background. It just makes it very hard, especially for people who may have any kind of physical impairment. Don't center text on a page. Doesn't look right. Don't justify text on a page. You get a lot of gaps when you do that. That doesn't look right. If the first lines of paragraphs are indented, you don't need as much space between paragraphs or any space. Don't use reverse type, which is a white text on a colored background. This is a way that a book looks. This is the way that it looks written for the web. Again, much easier to scan your way through here than it is through here. All right, so when you're writing for the web, use as few words as possible. Write in an inverted pyramid style, which means it's kind of like an outline. All right? In fact, I'd say it's reverse outline. It's not from general to specific. It's specific to general. Use headings and subheadings. Use bulleted lists when possible. Use tables only for tabular information. Don't use all caps for headings. Make the text for all links as explicit as possible. Again, keep line length 65 characters or fewer. Same thing you saw right there. This is the life cycle for a website. You design, you implement, you maintain. And you notice then you go back to the beginning because you're always tweaking the design. And eventually the maintenance will stop and you'll start all over with a new phase, with a new design, new implementation, and new maintenance. To make a website easier to maintain, as it says, use HTML for content only. Use CSS for page layout and formatting. And as we'll see when we get into it, for interactivity, use JavaScript. Don't use tables for page layout. Again, we mentioned this before. Only use tables for tabular information. Frames are pretty much a thing of the past. Probably the only time you might see frames on a web page would be an iframe, and what that is kind of a holder. So if on your page you've got a YouTube video or something like that. All right? Get the design right before you start the implementation. So this is what we're going to start doing once we finish these slides and the slides for our JavaScript jQuery book. That is, we're going to define our audience and set our goals. Develop a sitemap. Sketch or wireframe the critical pages in black and white. Illustrate the critical pages in full color. Well, I won't have full color. They'll all be in black and white. Then we'll develop the HTML and CSS templates. We'll develop the web pages. We'll deploy the site to a live server. We'll test and launch it. As far as maintenance, plan your changes, design your changes, implement your changes, test and launch the changes. Things are always going to happen when you create anything. I spent a few years as a programmer programming in the telecommunications area. And there were always things that happened that we didn't plan for. I spent a year as a programmer analyst for an aerospace company. Same kind of thing. Things are always going to happen that you don't envision happening. All right, I'm not going to talk about this town hall. They give their own example. All right, but the good news is they go through it. They define their target audience. They define the website goals. They create a sitemap. Then here's a sitemap for Muroc. Here's a sketch. So we're going to be creating something like this using Balsamic Mockup 3, but ours will look much more professional in this. The old saying is when you create these, a lot of times you create them first on a napkin, then you put them into software. Here's more of the kind of thing that we're going to create. This is a wireframe. And notice sometimes you'll get a picture, a Photoshop illustration that says, hey, web developer, build this. A large website managed by a team, okay. Typical members of a team, you've got web designers. Those are people who might have a flair for color, font, etc. They design. Writers, those are people who are going to create the textual content. Marketing specialists, people who know how to sell the site. A lot of times they're going to work, the web designer, the marketing specialist, the graphic designers will all work together. You want your website to pop, as they say. As far as the web developers, you have HTML and CSS specialists. You have client-side programmers, server-side programmers, database administrators, network administrators. Good, bad, or indifferent, when it comes to this implementation, if you work for a small site, you might basically have wear every one of those hats. In fact, you might wear every hat that's in here. Web designers participate in all phases of web design. Graphic designers are more focused on making the pages work better and look better. A couple prototypes, and that's it. So when I come back in just a few minutes, Not bad, I'm at 20 minutes. So when I come back, I will continue onward and upward with Chapter 18 on how to deploy a website on a web server. Be back with that shortly.